I really struggle when it comes to naming my videos for these projects. Typically, I just head out into my shop to make something because, like you, I just love making stuff. There's something so cool about creating something that previously only existed in your mind. And some of these projects will live on long after I'm gone. I love that. And that's the real reason that I do this. But that being said, I also love making these videos and I want to show them to everyone. But to get more people to watch them, I'm forced to bait the viewer. Personally, I'd like to call this video Media Console. But I know that no one will click on a video called Media Console, so that's out. It's a real problem because I'm not a fan of clickbait, but I also want people to see these videos because when it comes down to it, I'm proud of them. So, while I explain to you how I went about building this project, I'll be trying to figure out the perfect title to get you to click on this video. Whatever it is, I guess it worked because you're here, so that's a plus. Anyway. So far, all I've done is break down some pallets and make them into usable lumber with my track saw, table saw, planer, and joiner. Once I had cut all my pallet wood into workable pieces, I decided I'd glue up all these pieces to make a top. You'll see a little later in this video that none of these plans that I originally had end up working out very well. Although I do end up using all of this wood even though it didn't go as I planned. I'm using my track saw right there to cut a straight side on one side of the pallet board. Then I can bring it over to my table saw, put that straight side against the fence, and run it through my table saw, giving me a board with two straight sides. I cut every one of these boards and it took me forever. Then I ran a bead of glue on all of these boards and laid them down on a piece of melamine. This is before I built that panel glue up table, which you can find the link to somewhere up here, or maybe. I might have done it, maybe I didn't. So what I did to glue all these panels up was lay them down on this piece of melamine and then use some wedges to tighten all of the boards to one another. Then I put a bunch of heavy stuff on top of them so they wouldn't bow. And then the next morning I could come out, take the wedges out and remove all of these heavy things off the top. And then I could remove the pallet panels. And there you go, a bunch of pallet wood all glued up. My original intentions were to build this entire thing out of just pallet wood. So I started cutting all of these boards to the final lengths and widths on my table saw using this giant sled that I made specifically for this project. But not seen here is me throwing a fit like a child because 3 of the panels broke after I cut them. So I decided, screw it, I'm gonna build this entire cabinet out of 1/2-inch plywood that I can then cover with pallet wood. So it looks like it's all built out of pallet wood when it's done. I measured and used my track saw to cut this into a more manageable piece before I brought it into my workshop where I could cut it all on my table saw and miter saw to their final dimensions. Hey, did I mention that I have shirts?
Are you tired and frustrated?
At Vino's, we've got the fashion.
Only $28 for one shirt, and that includes shipping to anywhere in the United States. Send an email to d13shirts@gmail.com. A link down below in the description. Once you contact me on there and tell me what size shirt you want, I can send you a link to my Venmo and you can pay me through there. That's right, Venmo only. And international shipping costs way more. Questions or concerns, call 1-719-266-283. Die Charlie. Once I had all my pieces of plywood cut, I could run a bead of glue along all my seams, and using my brad nailer, I could nail all of this together. I cut some blocks out of the scrap wood so that I could set my shelf right on top of that, knowing that it would be level all the way across. Then I could go along the sides and nail all of these boards on. I cut these little strips to go underneath each shelf to help secure and hold that up, and then I shot myself right in the finger with the nail gun. Woo! It got me. Shorter. Now I should have made this little spot for the records and the speakers before I nailed everything together, but I didn't. So I had to figure out another way that I was going to nail in these boards because I wasn't able to get the nail gun in there. So I just took some little finishing nails and had to use my hammer sideways just to fit in there. And I was able to nail down into that board and help secure it. Right there, I'm just nailing a back onto that spot where the records are going to slide in so that they won't slide too deep into the back. I'm going to be covering the entire sides with pallet wood. Oh, as you can see right there. So the little nail holes and the screw holes that I put into the plywood aren't going to show because I'm putting this pallet wood right over the top. So I just brought all those panels that I glued up of pallet wood over to my table saw and recut them all back into usable strips. It was a huge pain in the ass and felt like a huge waste of time, but I did end up with kind of cool pattern on the side of this because of that. I used a combination of my track saw and my router with a flush trim router bit to get all of these pallet boards cut flush to the edge of the plywood. Now I'm just facing the front of all of this pallet wood and plywood, so you won't see the plywood seams with little strips of pallet wood. I did that for the whole front of this cabinet, and then I took my sander and sanded it all nice and clean. Alright, here's that top that I glued up earlier. Remember when I wasted all that time gluing up that top? Yeah. Now I'm cutting it all back down because this is going to be the base for this cabinet. Brought it over to my miter saw, I cut these legs to their length. Then I could bring it back over to my table saw, and I've got my old table saw sled right here. And all I did was just take my little brad nailer and nail these little pieces of wood right around it so I could line it up and get the same cut on all 4 of my legs. After I had that done, I could go grab my Kreg jig and drill out the holes I needed to help attach all of this together. The Kreg jig is such a great tool for this. If you don't have a Kreg jig, I'd recommend getting one. It's a really simple way to get a base like this made. I got this little clamp right here to help hold everything together. Kreg also makes this, and it helps hold it all together while you put your first screw in, and then you can take that out and put your second screw in. I screwed all of this together to create a square that this entire cabinet can sit on, and then after that I went back to my miter saw to cut these 45s on these little pieces for the corners to help make this base a little more secure. Once that was done, I could fill in all of my holes on the base that I had pre-drilled with these dowels, and then using my Japanese pole saw I could cut them off. I decided I wanted to do a pattern for the front of these cabinet doors, and I thought if I used all pallet wood, it would have a lot of different colors all over in it, so that's what I decided to go with. And to make all of these hexagons, I had to do this. Take this, set your gauge at 60. Now, you can take a piece of wood, screw that right down, and you want it to go across the cut. I'll show you why in a second. Alright, so you can take another piece of scrap wood like this, make a cut. So you made your cut, and this is now a 60-degree angle. You're going to take that and put it as far over as you want your hexagon to be. So for me, I think it was about 1.5 inches. I just kind of estimated. And you can take a screw and screw this board down. There we go. Now, let's say we do this one. That's garbage. Flip this over. Now, turn it counterclockwise. Put it in the corner. Counterclockwise again. And again. Make sure it's all good. There you go. perfect little hexagon. Once I had my table saw sled all set up, I could go ahead and cut out all of these hexagons. Once I had all of my hexagons cut out, which I think was 115 hexagons, it took me forever. I brought it into that table I made recently for doing glue ups, hoping that I could clamp everything tight, but I couldn't seem to get the pressure in all the different directions all at the same time. So what I did was clamp it all as tight as I could, and then I covered the entire back of all of these hexagons with glue. And then I could take this 1/8 inch plywood and lay it on the back of these hexagons and then nail down through the back of the plywood into the back of the hexagon so you wouldn't see nail holes in all of the front of the cabinet. I repeated this twice and then had everything glued up the best I could. So then I brought it over to my drum sander, ran it through the drum sander, and got everything nice and flush and level with one another. So originally I was planning on framing in all around these hexagons, but then all of a sudden I remembered Pee-wee's Playhouse. Mick-a-lick-a-hi, Mick-a-hi-yo. I decided I wanted to have a zombie style opening door in the front, and I'm so happy I did this. I used my bandsaw to cut out each of these little triangle sections so that both of these cabinet doors would line up correctly and slide right into one another. I cut down some oak that I had laying around to create a frame for the sides of these cabinet doors. I cut a 45 for all 4 corners of these cabinet doors. Then I could run these boards through my table saw to remove a channel that the front of these cabinets will sit in. I decided that I wanted to cut the frame to match the doors, so I brought it over to my bandsaw and used my bandsaw to make those cuts as well. Once that was done, I could attach these frames to these doors. These cabinet doors were a huge pain, but I am so happy I did it. It's my favorite part of this entire cabinet, and I think there's a lot of people out there that won't like them at all. But to me, it was different, and it reminded me so much of Pee-wee's Playhouse, so I can't complain one bit. Now it was time to try to attach these doors and make sure that they would line up with each other when they closed. I knew this was going to be incredibly difficult. I first tried just using regular cabinet hinges and it didn't work at all. So I went to the store and got the cabinet hinges that you need to use a Forstner bit to drill the holes for, because those cabinet hinges are completely adjustable. This piece of wood that I used for the top of this, I found on the train tracks. Most pieces of wood that you find on the train tracks have something in them called creosote. It's like a sealer type tar that is inside of the wood that is extremely toxic, and you do not want to work with any wood that has that in it. But this piece, I did a small cut on the side and gave it a big old sniff, and it did not have any creosote in it. So I was super excited that I was going to be able to use this for the top, but it was completely warped and I knew it was going to be a lot of work. So I had to set up a jig with my router to start flattening this long piece of wood out. Once I had one side of this board flattened, I tried running it through my planer, but it didn't go well. This is a really hard piece of wood, so I decided I would cut it to its final dimensions, glue it all up, and then use my router jig to flatten the other side as well. And then using my angle grinder and starting with a 40 grit sandpaper, I just sanded the crap out of this thing so it was perfectly smooth. Once I had it all smooth, the cabinet doors were done, everything painted black. Oh yeah, I forgot, I painted everything black. That's probably somewhere in the video. I might have missed it. If I did, I'm sorry. I put this piece of wood across the back to help support the entire cabinet, but it is also a spot where I can attach some hinges so that this top flips open and I can put my records in. Once I got it in, I got everything working. Then I attached this thing so when I open up the top, it just holds the top open and I don't have to worry about the top falling back down while I'm putting a record on. I'm still not sure what I'm going to name this video, but I hope you clicked on it. And more importantly, I hope it inspires you to turn this off, go outside, and go make something of your own. Because making something that didn't exist before is always cool. Especially when the end result is you getting to dance around with your kids in your living room. Nothing beats that.
Bye, see you again, and have a good dream.